go over the sensory areas that are associated with the cerebral cortex. Remember that we will be talking about the conscious awareness of sensation, and the lobes that are involved will be the parietal lobe, the insula, the temporal lobe, and the occipital lobe. And that's a list of the major sensory areas. We already know that the somatosensory or primary somatosensory or sensory cortex is going to be seated within the postcentral gyrus of the parietal lobe. It is going to receive general and basic sensory information from your skin, as well as from those proprioceptors of skeletal muscle and joints and tendons. Remember, proprioception is the ability to know where you are in space. It allows for spatial discrimination, so you know what body region has been stimulated. And of course, there is a sensory homunculus, which is associated with that. And that shows you the motor homunculus on the left and the sensory homunculus on the right. There will be a sensory association cortex that is posterior to the primary sensory cortex. It is going to integrate sensory information that came from the primary sensory cortex, so you can understand what an object is that you're seeing and feeling and touching. It will help determine the size, the texture, as well as the relationship of the parts of the object that you are holding or touching. You should absolutely positively know right off the bat what the primary visual cortex is and where it is. It is going to be housed in the occipital lobe, and it is going to receive and process visual information from your retinas. There is a visual association area that's going to be surrounding the primary visual cortex. This is pretty cool because it takes information that you have from past visual experiences to interpret what you're seeing now. So what color, form, movement. And in fact, this is why you're able to recognize faces. It's very complex processing, and it's going to involve the posterior half of the cerebral hemispheres. It's pretty cool. Primary auditory cortex is going to be along the superior areas of the temporal lobes. It will take information from your inner ear after you've heard something and let you be able to process pitch, loudness, and the location of the sound. There is, of course, an auditory association area, which is going to be posterior to the primary auditory cortex. And that will allow you to store memories of what you hear and also allow you to perceive the stimulation that you're hearing, or the sound that you're hearing when your cochlea is stimulated. Primary olfactory cortex, that's going to be within the temporal lobes. It is part of what's known as the primitive rhinencephalon and is associated with the olfactory bulbs and the tracts. So this is going to be pretty interesting and something you need to remember, because if you've ever gotten a smell or walked past a store or into a room and you smell something and you have a flood of memories that comes back, it is because the olfactory tract, which carries information about your sense, what you've smelled, to the olfactory cortex, this is very closely linked to the areas that are responsible for memory, the amygdala and the hippocampus, which we'll talk about in another section. And they are actually part of several systems, some of which we don't talk about, but they are so closely linked that odor is linked to memory much more clearly and much more definitively than any of the other scents. This allows you to be consciously aware of various odors. Totally cool how odor triggers memories. The gustatory cortex is all about taste. That is within the insula, and it allows you to perceive what you're tasting. This just gives you a quick picture of some of the areas we've discussed. Actually, we discussed all of these areas.